would see like just about everyone talking about crypto and trying to use it everywhere. But 3 years ago, one of the big challenges was, well, there was a lot of things the technology was not ready for, right? And so there were a lot of crypto users, but not a lot of blockchain users, right? Instead, like to use crypto and to use it with a good user experience and low enough fees, the only way was a Binance account. Now, since then, I think there's been a huge growth in the amount of people building here, also elsewhere around the world, in the number of people actually using applications on chain. And the biggest reason why, I think, is that the biggest user experience problems that we've had have basically gone away, right? So one big user experience problem was fees. In 2021, to send a transaction on chain, transaction fee was about $2. And so to pay for a coffee here, well, coffee would cost less than $2, so a transaction fee would cost more than the coffee, right? Second reason is the amount of time that you'd have to wait after you send a transaction. It was high, and it was also very volatile, right? So you would send a transaction, sometimes it would get in 30 seconds, sometimes you wait 5 minutes, sometimes you wait 30 minutes. Now, Ethereum already improved upon Bitcoin by having a shorter block time, but it's still not good enough, right? And since 2021, on both of these issues, we have seen just massive improvements, right? So on transaction fees, we have seen the growth of layer 2s. And this year, because of EIP 4844, which introduced blobs, layer 2s have seen their fees drop to now regularly under 1 cent per transaction. And so applications that were basically impossible before are now just completely viable, and people can go build them, and you can go and use them. Now, this also actually means that blockchains even become useful for non-financial applications, right? If you imagine building a non-financial applications, right? Think of it as the internet, where every time you click a button, you have to pay 25 cents. Now, if the internet worked this way, almost all applications would not work, right? Nobody would use Twitter, nobody would use Facebook. Maybe the rich people would use Twitter, but even the rich people, they would not use Twitter because there would not be enough people to interact with them and make them feel important, right? So, like, basically nothing that would really work, right? And but then if you reduce that fee from 25 cents down to basically zero, lots of things that were just completely not viable just become possible, right? And so if you're just building a financial application, transaction fees that are higher, in a lot of cases you can pay them. Non-financial applications, like, you really need to get the fees down. And this is what we have actually succeeded at doing. Now, transaction times, right? So the user experience where you have to send a transaction and then you have to go and get a coffee because you don't know when the transaction will be accepted, this is not a good user experience. This was Ethereum's user experience 3 years ago. Since then, we've had EIP 1559, which reforms the fee market. And one of the results of it is that transactions reliably get included within 1 or 2 blocks. Also, we've had the merge, and the merge actually, as one of its consequences, even though it did not change the block time, it actually reduced the average amount of time you have to wait until the next block from 12 seconds to 6 seconds. And this is like one of those interesting results of probability theory. So if anyone here is interested in math, it's a fun puzzle to figure out why. But this also happened, right? And then after this, we've had fast confirmations on layer 2s, thanks to pre-confs. And so on many layer 2s, you only wait 1 second for a transaction to get confirmed. So we've gone from transactions taking a long time to confirm all the way down to transactions being like faster than most credit card infrastructure. So huge amount of progress on both costs and on fees. Also, the other part of the reason why, I think, is like the social reasons, right? So Argentina has a unique combination where there is a very strong local developer community, right? There's been many projects that have had parts of their team or the whole team in Argentina. You know, people from Open Zeppelin, people from MakerDAO, Proof of Humanity, all kinds of different projects for a long time. Kleros, the list is very long, right? And also a very high user adoption, right? There's huge numbers of people here that have tried and used crypto, and to them, crypto is at least some level of familiarity already. And so these are things that have been here for a long time, right? I think the new variable this year is, of course, that instead of the government being a problem, there's actual top-down support from the government, or at least a lot of interest in being supportive to this community, right? And so it's this interesting combination of factors that I think you really don't see in most other places, right? So what kinds of applications do I think make sense, right? So I see a few different categories. So one of these categories is just continuing to make basic payments and savings work better. So this is a wallet called Dymo. Its goal is to try to have user experience that is as good as Venmo and make that work with crypto. So it's built on USDC and on Base. And basically just build a wallet that is intended for regular people to be able to use to pay each other. If someone doesn't want to deal with Ethereum addresses, they don't have to. They can pay to a phone number just like you can with our Web2 payment applications. So payments continue to be an important app, and payments continue to be important for people saving money. They continue to be important for business, continue to be very important for international transactions, right? I think it's important to remember that even if the best possible outcome formula happens here, and if everything that you think is wrong with the Argentinian economy finance regulation disappears, there's still the problem of transacting between Argentina and Chile, Argentina and Venezuela, Argentina and the United States. So international trade in general it continues to be hard, and around basically everywhere around the world except for between rich countries that have very good connections to each other, right? So continuing to make payments easier to the point where it's a practical option for people. Part of it is user experience, part of it is also on-ramps and off-ramps, right? Often on-ramps and off-ramps are actually the limiting factor to things like this actually being useful for people to actually make a core part of their business. So application category 2, right, which is more complicated financial tools. So these are ideas that I've already heard from developers here, right? So bonds, real estate fractionalization, corporate shares, any kind of asset other than Argentinian pesos or dollars or euros or cryptocurrencies, any kind of other real economy asset, you can put it on chain, tokenize it, and potentially open up a lot of possibilities for people to do things with it that they were not able to do before, right? And bonds, obviously, they already exist, but we can make them more accessible. Corporate shares already exist, but you can explore putting corporate records on the blockchain, and then actually making it possible for people to trade shares on chain. And real estate fractionalization, this is something that doesn't really exist as an asset class now. I mean, there are real estate investment trusts and you can get some shares, but relatively a very underdeveloped sector. And so I think this is also something that's really worth exploring and looking into. So a lot of opportunities to create DeFi platforms that are not just trading between things that are inside of crypto, but that are actually trading between assets that are connected to the real economy in here and potentially around the world. So we could also get into some more of these kind of more advanced science fiction categories. So this is what I call info finance, right? So I wrote a blog post on this about a month ago, and this year, one of the application types that we've seen make a lot of impact is prediction markets. And the reason why I talk about them is that they've actually gotten a huge amount of attention from people outside of crypto, right? There are even intellectuals who normally hate crypto and think crypto is a scam. Even they are retweeting screenshots of Polymarket, right? And so this is what mass adoption looks like, right? And the way that I view prediction markets is I view them as a gambling site for the bettors, but a news site for people who are reading, right? So if you are not betting on these markets, what you can do is you can go and you can look at what the prices are, and this gives you valuable information, right? And it gives you and so this actually helps solve another really important problem, which is how do we create better tools to help identify what is true and what is not true on the internet, and do that in a way that does not depend on some pre-selected group that already knows what all the truths are and what all the lies are. So it's a very powerful tool, and I mean, I've noticed like myself starting to use it in my information gathering workflow. A lot of others have as well. And like I see the stuff that exists right now as being just one example of a much larger category, right? And prediction markets are one example. Decision markets for governance are another example, right? So you can make markets that basically ask people, the market, the question, if you make one decision, what will happen? If you make another decision, what will happen? And then you use this as information to create decisions. So these are things that you can actually try to put into DAOs, and you can actually try to like use these ideas to resolve problems that we see in existing DAOs, right? So for example, in existing DAOs, one of the big problems is that very few people participate in voting, right? So often you have like 3% of the tokens vote, and so someone can come in with 5% of the tokens and just like take it over, make a vote that does whatever they want. So how might we solve this problem? Well, one way to do it is you have a decision market on each question that basically says, well, if the question did come to a vote, then how would people vote for it? And if that market says most people would vote against, then you automatically increase the threshold. Right? So this is just one very simple idea, right? So you use the market to give people an opportunity and an incentive to identify and make available information that the DAO does not have. And then you do that to try to make the rest of the governance mechanism more effective. So there's a lot of different ways to use decision markets and prediction markets in governance. It's a very big space. There are DAOs starting to do this already. So very interesting thing to get into. Public goods funding. So in the Ethereum ecosystem, we've had Gitcoin quadratic funding, we've had Optimism retro funding, a very big category. And it's a very valuable category, right? Because the things that our ecosystem depends on, lots of them are what we call public goods, right? They're projects where once you make them, they are immediately available to everyone. And as a result, they're important, but they're very difficult to monetize. They're very difficult to make money for just by selling them. And so we need some other way of funding these things. And one of the ideas is, well, actually, you can use decision markets and governance also as a way of figuring out which public goods deserve the most funding. So the basic idea here is you have some kind of human governance mechanism that is making a very small number of decisions of which projects deserve funding, and then you create an open market where people can use AIs and generate a much larger list of how much funding theoretically every possible project on GitHub or every public project in the country deserves to get. And then you basically use the human governance mechanism as a signal to identify which of the AI models are correct and to reward the ones that are more correct and give them more weight in the decision making. So a lot of very interesting ideas here. Category 4 is ZK, right? So this is like, I think ZK has become this very important sister technology to blockchains, right? And the reason why it's such a powerful sister technology is that the properties that blockchains provide and the properties that ZK provides are very complementary, right? Blockchains give you openness, censorship resistance, auditability, verifiability at the expense of two very important things. One is privacy, one is scalability. What do zero-knowledge proofs give you? They give you privacy and they give you scalability. So these two technologies, they are very effective together. And we've seen, I think, also very interesting non-financial applications of zero-knowledge proofs. So identity is one important use case. Quark ID here in Buenos Aires Also ZooPass, a zero-knowledge identity system that's being originally used in Zuzulu, also being used in a lot of Ethereum events. Then one really interesting recent experiment was Anoncast, which is an account that was on Farcaster and Twitter. And if you have a sufficient number of Anon coins, then you can use a zero-knowledge proof and you can broadcast from it. And so the idea here is that you have an environment where people can speak freely, but at the same time, like you have some kind of filter, so it doesn't just get overwhelmed by like an unlimited amount of like fake information and bots. And so you create something that's still like interesting for people to pay attention to. Right now, what's interesting, I think, about this idea is like there's different ways to make the filter, right? So the beginning Anoncast approach, you have to have 10,000 Anon tokens, and then you can post. This is one approach. But you can also think of something that is similar to Anoncast, but that is connected to Quark ID in some way, right? Like that, I think, is already a good hackathon project, right? Make a fork of Anoncast, except instead of Anoncast, it's like Argentinian cast, right? And like Argentinians can tweet what they want, but nobody knows which Argentinian. Then voting, right? So Zoopoll, we zero-knowledge proof-based voting, and we see a lot of different examples of zero-knowledge proofs being used for voting. I think this is also one of those really powerful primitives where once you make it work well enough, you can start to use it in many different situations. One interesting theme that I think is really interesting for people to think about, and this is one I think that is can only be enabled by the combination of a strong grassroots community and top-down support. And this is a local micro-democracy, right? So what do I mean by this? We already have reasonably secure macro-democracy, right? We have elections, you can vote every 4 years, every 6 years, different number of years in different countries. You vote, paper ballots, like it's very well understood. And then the other thing that we have is we have insecure micro-democracy, right? You have likes and retweets on social media, but then everyone knows like those can be manipulated very easily. You don't know whether to trust them. So we have these two things. Well, what if you can have secure micro-democracy, right? What if you can come up with democratic mechanisms where regular people are able to provide input on like much smaller scale micro questions, and then that actually directly feeds into government budgeting decisions, potentially government subsidy and tax decisions, like what do you want to see more of, what do you want to see less of, and have that turn into a signal that just becomes directly accessible to entrepreneurs instead of being some complicated bureaucratic process, and also petitions, right? So petitions, I think, are a very good low-risk place to start. Basically, you can have something where anyone can post a message, and then anyone can upvote the message, anonymous vote, and if 10,000 people anonymously upvote a message, you pass a law that the central government is required to make a response. They're not required to do any specific thing, just make a response, right? And I think this is interesting because it creates this like much lower risk way to really start using the technology, and then we can see where things actually go from there, right? So a lot of the on-chain governance and finance ideas that I talked about, including futarchy and decision markets, including deep funding, like all of these things, I think they potentially have use cases in local government. So this could include like local municipal budgets. This could even include like funding public media, funding local media. I mean, it could funding physical infrastructure. It could include a lot of different things, right? And so I think this is also one category that's really worth looking into, especially like as some of these more advanced technologies also become more useful. So I guess the organizers want people to scan the QR code, so you can scan the QR code. But I mean, I think like those are some examples, right, of applications that I think are worth building. Right? I think crypto right now has gotten good enough that it's a technology that can actually give users the level of like quality of experience, the level of low cost, the level of speed that they expect for financial applications, and even to the point where things other than financial applications can also be built as well. And now is a great opportunity to build things that are going to be very useful for people across a number of different industries. And so I highly encourage people to like look at all of these ideas and also look at other ideas, and let's build great things. Thank you.